Dire wave
3.
Our anthropology is not derived by human psychology or, empirical data from MIT or something like this. It's derived from the revealed aspect of what we see in Christology. And so there's no real way to diagnose man's problem and to understand man and man's anthropology, as I said, without the right theology. Logos is the icon of the Father, and man is the icon of God. We are the image of God.
Dire wave
3.
are you?
I'm good. How are you? Hold on, let me
Good.
move you over to the. Gotta move you over
We're
to the correct screen here.
we're live, so
Oh, there we go. Okay, cool.
don't say your horrid bigot things. Your horrible
I'll
bigotries until you realize we're live.
I'll try to restrain myself.
All the sizing got messed up, so let me see. There we go. Yeah, there we go. Where's your witch burning background? That was some fire background you had.
That was pretty cool. I just went with just something basic for today.
Basics. All right. There we go. Yeah, so welcome everybody. Today we have our esteemed guest and friend, Rachel Wilson, who has her channel linked in the show description as Rachel Wilson, the Rachel
Yay!
Wilson channel. And I did a stream a couple nights ago, and a shout out to Father John Whiteford for sharing that. Appreciate that quite a bit. And that was a kind of a feisty stream covering the topic of institutional subversion, institutional capture. And of course, Rachel is a great researcher and author on this topic because she recently put together a piece. I meant to have that linked. Let me pull that up. I've got it. It's your Substack article on how institutions subvert Christianity. So let's maybe kick it off with that one because that was such a powerful article. Before we do that, though, everybody, you guys know that Rachel covers occult feminism. I've got her book here with me. If you don't have her excellent book, Occult Feminism, be sure and get it. You can get that over in her links. I'll put a link to that book as well, Occult Feminism. We just did an interview a couple weeks ago before all of our Austin event and all that madness that we were involved in, and we had a great response. Rachel, I think we've gotten over 20,000 on our interview. Isn't that cool?
Yeah, it's super cool. Thank you everybody so much for sharing and commenting and all that stuff. I was pleasantly surprised. So thanks a lot.
So here's the link to the article that we're going to start with. And Rachel's got a bunch of other research that she can go into. And remember, we are on YouTube, so we're going to have to use, code words if we can.
Yes.
And her article is right there. It's called How Big Foundation Money is Subverting Traditional Christianity. So first, before we get into it, how did you get interested in that topic? Because aside from myself and maybe 2 or 3 other people, nobody ever seems to talk about this or notice that foundation money, secret money, big money, that's how you change these institutions.
Well, it was kind of a couple things. One is that it did overlap a bit with the research I did for my book, which took me like 2.5 years. So kind of covered a lot of territory, but I did keep running into this repeatedly, that these like early feminist groups would, get basically the people who were at the forefront of that would get this grant money or foundation money or kind of be pushed forward by big philanthropic foundations, the typical ones that we hear about, like the Rockefellers and Ford Foundation and things like that. And the reason I wrote this article is because of last summer when there was a big kerfuffle with Abbott Tree Fund, and I saw the people who were pushing lots of lies and just outright false information about that. And rather than just yelling at them on Twitter or something, I thought, well, let's find out who funds these entities. And I had kind of caught on to that like a year before and noticed some things and made some notes. And I had a folder, as Jim Bob might say, about some of these folks and some of these entities. And sure enough, I looked into it, and the people who were pushing all this stuff about Abbott Tree Fund were the usual suspects. And if you looked into them, I found who did all their funding and who puts them out there, right? Because they don't have to do what you have to do, which is build an audience from the ground up, taking years to organically get a following and have people listen to you. No, they get giant amounts of funding and they get pushed by really, really big institutions to say certain things and push certain narratives. So that I just thought, well, let's take a look and see what these people are about and where they get their money from and who is pushing them. And so that's what this article is.
And of course, you noted that, as we pointed out over here, it's not really different in terms of institutional capture and institutional subversion for Protestants and Roman Catholics, right? Those groups also saw the same type of subversion and change in theology and doctrine. Now, in the Protestant world, You can go back to the 20s and 30s and 40s when, as I've detailed from the Rockefellers' authorized biography, they intentionally bought seminaries, professors, professorships, donated money, created essentially the movement of liberal Protestantism to counteract what they called fundamentalism. And fundamentalism wasn't just crazy, preachers out in the boonies that, thought it was the end of the world and the rapture was coming. Fundamentalism was defined at that time as believing 5 fundamentals of Christianity, which we all would believe: the virgin birth, the Trinity, the bodily resurrection, inspiration of scriptures, and so forth. So that was actually what fundamentalism was, and that's what liberal Protestantism was created. It was actually a creation. I'm not saying there weren't already liberal tendencies in Protestantism. There were with, Lutheranism and Julius Wellhausen and the documentary hypothesis, sure. But in America in the 20th century, we can specifically trace to the families, to the foundations that bragged about how they would change the institution of Protestant Christianity by design, and that includes feminism. It includes new sexual moralities. It includes new ideas of what men and women are. It includes all of the things that you would expect, and that essentially is funneled into the World Council of Churches and the National Council of Churches via Rockefeller money. But it doesn't stop there. You have to understand that you have Union Seminary created by the Rockefellers. You have Riverside Cathedral created by the Rockefellers to initiate this new era of a kind of new Christianity, which is intended to be blended with something down the road, which we've talked about in other streams about the Vatican. But that's not what we're talking about tonight. We're talking about, it's not just let's create a parallel institution, a parallel outside of your church thing. They also want to change from within the churches via, we'll buy you a giant $1 million complex for your seminary. We will pay for grant money for your at Fordham University. We will do this. We will do that. You get all this money if you push this agenda. And they put heat on the clerics. They put heat on the people to bend and to cave to this agenda. And that's how it really actually in the real world works.
Yeah, so that's what I wrote in my Substack article. Is I really wanted to break this down and make it easy for people to understand so they could follow like a direct trail. Because as you said, when you try to bring this up, you get a lot of people, even people who you would think should be kind of like on our side on this, pushing back and be like, no, that's a conspiracy. Don't say that. And they think it like discredits the religion to say that, which it doesn't. It's just that we have a century plus. I mean, there's always been some level of institutional subversion with the churches, but it really got going with these philanthropic foundations, which I would argue are not really philanthropic at all. It's kind of a cover. It's like a way to essentially wash money, send it where you want, do activism, influence public policy, influence the institutions, and say, oh, I'm just doing charity, right? Oh, we're just advocating for this cause, but that's not really what's going on. So when I looked into Fordham, which Sarah Riccardi Schwartz comes from, she works with them and for them. She's part of the public orthodoxy circles, right? That whole thing, that whole program through Fordham is funded by the Luce Foundation. You go right to their website, it will tell you, they even have the logo, they'll say this is all funded by the Luce Foundation. And if you guys don't know who Henry Luce was, he was a multi-billionaire, Skull and Bones, Bohemian Club guy. He started Life magazine. Yes, exactly. And he created something in 1968 called the Luce Professorship Program. And this was an extension of like kind of a public declaration he had made in 1941 at the beginning of the war, where he said, it was kind of a manifesto that he published in his own magazine, where he called it the Great American Century, which kind of instantly reminded me of Project for a New American Century. And it's along those lines where he said,
yep.
We need like a progressive democratic internationalism. We have to take our Americanist progressive democracy and spread it internationally, which is basically the Bush Doctrine. So this stuff is really old. This is not new at all. It's the same people. It's the same agenda. And I will get into a little bit later how the Bush Foundation, which has the same manifesto as the Luce Foundation, also funded these same kind of projects. So, this was.
Let me comment on this because I talked about
sure.
this today on Lord Voldemort in the 4th hour, and what we were talking about was the era of the Cold War. Prior to the Cold War in the 1940s, you had the creation, not just with NATO in the 1940s, as a way to hedge against the Soviet Union, supposedly from a defensive standpoint. You also had the Keenan Doctrine, which ties into what Rachel's talking about, which is the idea coming out of the State Department for policy planning in the 1940s. It was an integral memorandum classified as top secret, and it was called the American Century. Keenan's thesis was, as it was eventually classified, that we have about 50% of the world's wealth, but 6% of the world's population. In this situation, we cannot fail to see the object and the envy and be the object of envy and resentment of the rest of the world. Thus, in order to maintain this disparity and so forth, we will have to engage in what was at that time the leading post-war planners designed for a Americanist world order. But this is not what you think of nowadays as, well, we're just fighting for America. We're fighting for freedoms. No. The American century is the globalist century, nothing to do with you as Americans. The architects of this post-war U.S. dominated order explicitly chose not to call it an empire. However, it would be an empire wherein the United States would, in order to project its imperial power, use the guise of colonial liberation, democracy, free markets, and human rights as an effective diabolical propaganda coup across the world. So the extension of Americanism, and that includes the morality of Americanism, which is now Skittles, changing your biology, that is part of this agenda. That must be expanded and extended to Russia, Eurasia, and every country. So
Yes.
That doesn't just extend geopolitically and foreign policy. What Rachel's describing is also a domestic imperative that is part and parcel of the neoliberal imperium, the American century, changing the churches to align with this geopolitical agenda. And this, by the way, comes from Full Spectrum Dominance by F. William Engdahl, a great book about getting into the very things Rachel's talking about.
Yeah, so part of the reason they chose this strategy, because we're talking about Luce Foundation starting in 1936, and then his big manifesto, The Great American Century, in 1941, is because back in 1918, when the Bolsheviks took over in Russia, they had the idea to just eliminate the church. We're just going to get rid of it. We're going to take and seize their properties, seize their wealth. There will be no more church. That's it. And even within Bolshevik factions, there were people like Anatoly Lunacharsky and Maxim Gorky who said, that's a really bad idea. You can't do that. Like, religion's kind of an intrinsic part of being human, and you're going to get some serious backlash that's going to just be really counterproductive, which is exactly what happened. That did not go as well as they had hoped in Russia. And then when they tried doing de-veiling campaigns in Central Asia around the same time, it ended the same way, with like massacre and resistance and horrible things happening and lots of pushback, lots of resistance. It kind of galvanized the resistance rather than helping. So they decided a much better tactic is you just infiltrate the institutions, you infiltrate the churches, and you change them from within. And if you go to Sarah Riccardi Schwartz's own website and you look at her newest project she's working on, she says right there that she's upset about institutional hierarchs silencing the voices of women and Skittles people, and that her new project as an Orthodox feminist seeks to transform tradition. She doesn't want to upend it. She wants to completely transform it so that, you know, we're looking at like women clergy, we're looking at Skittles clergy, we're looking at Skittles affirmations in the church and things like this. And if you look at what Fordham is doing, they had this huge conference on LGBT acceptance, and it was framed as, oh, we're just exploring this, but it wasn't at all that they were exploring it. They were very heavily pushing it. So that's what's going on. But back to Luce Foundation, because this is like a root, right, that spread everywhere. And it wasn't just Orthodoxy that was affected. Over the course of 30 years, from 1968 to 1998, the Luce professorship program placed 72 new faculty appointees at over 50 colleges and universities throughout the United States. So what they did, and this is super common now, they were just the first ones to kind of pilot this program, create a professorship program where we're going to award certain academics with a professorship. It's kind of like an award that you get, right? Where if you're going to toe the progressive agenda that they want, they're going to award you a professorship, and you literally just get plopped into a major university to push their agenda. So they started that, and now it's super common. You see all kinds of institutions and foundations doing this, where they pick certain academics who they know are going to toe the line, and they place them strategically in areas of power. For example, this worked so well that a little bit down the road, the Henry Luce III Fellows in Theology program was created. And this had a stated goal of fostering interreligious dialogue, religious diversity, guys. There's one professor that used the Luce Fellowship program to do research on global warming and how it coincides with like end times theology, just as an example of one of these current people that I found. So yeah, this is what they do. This is how they infiltrate. And they specifically look for positions where that person is going to be a scholar who's going to have influence and be advising public policy and media institutions.
Absolutely. And I'm going to show you the CIA quote right here that proves that, from David Wimhoff's book, which is a 800-page, 1,000-footnote traditional Catholic lawyer who has documented all this with exceptional scholarship and detail. In terms of how this was geared towards the Roman Catholic Church, it's called the Doctrinal Warfare Program. This is C.D. Jackson's program, together with Henry Luce of the Luce Foundation,
yes,
Time Magazine, CIA, Skull and Bones, to create an infiltrated network who could steer and change the morality and the theology of the Roman Catholic Church to the purposes of the American century and Americanism. And so here you have right here, look at this page. Everybody can see that. I'm going to read it for you because we got a lot of slow boys out there who can't read. They would never read an 800-page book on this topic. They think this is an insane conspiracy theory. But I'm going to show you the actual declassified document from C.D. Jackson's own writings and papers. It says, quote, can't read it while it's all the way over there. It's not very long. The Department of State was responsible for increasing doctrinal materials in Voice of America broadcasts, particularly for publicizing and promoting interest in terms of doctrinal and theological matters. The Department of Defense, during the Cold War, was responsible for providing officers and enlisted personnel in service schools and units with a doctrinal theological background. Speeches, technical magazines, and others would be involved in this corporate doctrinal aspect. The CIA's responsibilities were set forth in an annex called Annex B, a top secret document that was later declassified in 2013. The CIA stated, quote, infiltrate individuals into foreign associations with theological potential, doctrinal potential, including newspapers, universities, etc., to influence their output. When appropriate, stimulate through non-attributable means, conferences and public forums, matters of doctrinal issue, academic forums, academic gatherings, conferences. Interfere with the promotion and distribution of hostile doctrinal theology, that is hostile to the agenda of Americanism. This is the same, you're saying that what Rachel's talking about is this program. She's talking about people in this program today. Create a deviationist movement that is designed to split existing organizations by promulgating hostile ideologies so long as they are no longer a threat to U.S. security. In other words, that neutralize by making them Skittles. Exploit local divergencies and local heresies. Exploit local heresies for the United States and the CIA's agenda. So stop being naive, stop being dumb, and realize that this is how the world really works. It's not a conspiracy theory. It's real doctrinal declassified programs. I'm ranting because I have to deal all the time with just stupid, naive people who act like this isn't real and who think that I'm the bad guy or you're the bad guy for talking about these things. You're the conspiracy theorist. You're saying scary things. You're a naive, childish, immature person who's going to have your church and your jurisdiction destroyed by this stuff if you don't understand that this is very real. You're not immune. You're not immune to this because you're Orthodox. Oh, I'm Orthodox. It's not going to happen to me. We're Orthodox. No, it will happen to you. It's happening to you now.
Yeah, and it's not hard to find. They tell you about it on their own websites. If you actually just go look, it's just that most people won't go look and comb through it. And they always present it as like a very, a good thing that they're doing, right? Because we want diversity and inclusivity. It's the same way that they push this agenda in other sectors. They do the same thing in the religious sector.
Well, it's ironic that Sarah Riccardi Swartz has called Father Damick a fascist, a right-wing fascist. When the irony of all that is that she's the very type of person that Father Damick wanted to placate and please by coming after me.
Yes. Yes.
So
that's exactly true.
Go.
That's exactly right. And I mean, you guys know, right, that in order to write her book, she infiltrated a small Appalachian parish for over a year and pretended to be one of them and like completely betrayed those people. How do you think she did that? Did she pay for that out of her own pocket? Absolutely not. She gets foundation money from Fordham and Public Orthodoxy and the universities that she works with to do these things. She's basically kind of writing a hit piece on their behalf. So I thought, well, turnabout's fair play. I'll just do the same thing and find out what, who's putting you up to this and where you're getting your funding from, because all she'll do is you can't talk to her. She'll just block you. But another really common example of this, another one, Columbia University got a huge grant from Luce Foundation to create something called the Center for Democracy, Toleration, and Religion, which seeks to wedge feminist skittles, progressive ideologies, specifically into traditional religions. So they're not worried about the already like progressive churches as much. They're specifically looking for like traditional Catholics, traditional Orthodox, and even traditional Muslim institutions to infiltrate and push feminism and Skittle stuff everywhere.
And keep in mind too, a lot of people might find this hard to believe because they have a very low IQ, low information mindset, which is that, well, the CIA fought against the liberals in the Cold War. So how could the CIA be for Skittle stuff? Well, they wouldn't promote that because they fought the commies. Did you know that the Communist Party had an anti-Skittles platform and the CIA pushed the Skittles to combat the communist platform? How ignorant are you people? You don't understand that the CIA funded Miss Magazine and feminism. The CIA put money into Playboy magazine.
Yes.
They funded and supported the radical sexual movements against communist and Soviet party platforms. That does not mean the communists and Soviets are good people. But what I'm saying is that strategy was liberation and sexual liberation against communism.
Yeah, us down here on the ground, we care about theology and public policy and politics. These people don't. They want power. They don't care about your beliefs. They don't care about the plight of LGBT people or sideline marginalized communities. No, this is all about power. It's all about influence and power. So you got to get rid of this mindset that like there's good guys over here and there's bad guys over here. No, the world is basically run by a bunch of criminal organizations that are fighting for power and dominance, and they'll use whatever means to get there, right? So now with the big push for internationalism and globalism and like a one world religion, you don't want any institutions that do have things they really stand for like this. So if you do have something like areas of the traditional Catholic Church or Islam or Orthodoxy that are still holding tradition, you've got to get in there and break that up. And this is the stated goal of these people. So for Fordham Center, if you guys don't believe that this affects Orthodoxy, Fordham Center for Orthodox Christian Studies had a loose-funded 2019 Oxford Conference on Orthodox Christian Sexual Diversity and Public Policy. And this was a very thinly veiled attempt to push Skittle stuff into the church. I won't go into super detail about that here just because I don't want to get Jay's channel in trouble or anything. But if you want to know like some of the people and what they said and some quotes from them and what they were doing at this conference, I have that in the article. But yeah, it was basically like a first big push publicly to try to get Skittle stuff into Orthodoxy and to say like, well, how long are we going to be the backwards religion that's not going with the flow that everyone else is and stuff like that. And so they had their special group of academics that push this stuff, and it became like this big thing. And then if you spoke out against it, of course you're a bigot. So yeah, Fordham OSC is also funded by the British Council. If you guys ever look into the British Council, they fund, it's another massive NGO that kind of does the bidding of the crown, but does a lot of globalist British Empire type activities. And they fund LGBT.
Yeah, and that's all
stuff.
for those that are wondering. That is in this older Ortho-Christian article, which you've seen me cite many, many times. I'm putting it in the chat right there. That's the one that references the British Council giving the money to Aristotle Papanicolaou, Archbishop Demetrios Chair in Orthodox Theological Studies, and George Demokopoulos getting grant money from the British Council. And I mean, it's not accidental, by the way, that these are all the same people that push that if you don't go along with this, you are part of the Russian bot agenda. And so that's why they focus on ROCOR and Russian Orthodox churches, is that it's all part of the overall geopolitical strategy and attack on the Russian church and what's going on in the Ukraine. That is why most of the people, by the way, that are aligned against myself and people in our circles are coming out of the OCA circles that are aligned with these people who also want to be aligned with Bartholomew and the CIA and the State Department in regard to they're going to paint us all as Russian bots, Russian spies, Russian operatives. They've already been doing that for a long time. And that ties into this, is what I'm trying to say, because it's not just an issue of the sexual morals. Like Rachel said, they don't really care about your sexual morals. This is a longer, bigger strategy that deals with using religious institutions as NGOs and forms of soft power. And so if the Russian Orthodox Church, for whatever faults and problems it has, if it can project its version of soft power in the global sphere that it is against the Skittles agenda, then naturally this sphere, this NATO sphere, what did NATO just tweet out? We're fighting with Thanos and the Marvel good guys against, we're fighting against Thanos, Putin, and we're the Marvel Avengers superheroes. Literally putting it into this soy bugman level of stuff. And the clerics who go along with this are at that same tier of this. I mean, they're also soy bugmen as well, because you'll notice in a recent ecumenist gathering, this was crazy. Mark Hackard sent me this. I actually couldn't believe that this was real. This is a bunch of, let me find it, clerics, Orthodox, I think. I can't tell if they're Uniate or Orthodox, but it's like, let me see if I think I can pull this up on the screen for everybody. Rachel, you may not be able to see it, but let's just notice the hypocrisy of this. Okay, so who would these Fordham people, they would call us right-wing Nazis, right? We're right-wing Nazis, which is just insane. Russia fought Nazis. How can it be a Nazi when Russians are like the enemy? I mean, that's like the ultimate enemy. And who are the real Nazis in the Ukraine right now? Oh, it's these people. The real Nazis. Let's put this up on the screen. There we go. And what is this? Oh, this is a Catholic church where we have what look like Orthodox clergy, Roman Catholic bishops, cardinals, in a big ecumenist gathering. And they are there with the flag of the Azov connected group. Let me see exactly who this is. The UPA. UPA is the earlier Ukrainian insurgent army supported by the Nazis, and then the Galen Network, and then the UNO is the Ukrainian Nationalist Organization. And so UPA, UNO are basically tied together. So basically they're all just standing there with a Nazi Azov connected flag. Oh, but they're pious anti-Putin people, you see. So they're actually literally there with like Nazi network, Galen network, Gladio network people. But if you're opposed to that, you're a Nazi. You see,
yeah,
this is how
social shaming is a big part of the strategy. socially shaming people and saying, like, if you're not with us, you're a bigot, you're a insert whatever kind of insult here. And this works particularly well on women, which is why I think they're always pushing for women to be clergy and other things like that, is because women are much more susceptible to social shame in general. And if they feel like they're hurting people's feelings or not being good, it's very easy to influence them that way. So I think that's another reason they push this stuff.
Well,
it's
and
like,
the social shaming,
you're mean.
yeah,
You're mean.
The social shaming stuff that they do like that, that's also really close to the it's like another type of piety signaling, where it's like, let's all gather around and figure out how super pious and self-righteous we are, because we're better than the people that don't approve of these lifestyles or who speak out about these types of things. Those are the bad people. We have to shame them and shout them down. But meanwhile, we pretend that we're doing it out of a place of piety and a place of superiority and a place of moral one-upping. But actually, that is even more demonic than the people who actually are just straight up evil, right? Because that's a Pharisee. A Pharisee is a person who pretends to have this super spiritual sort of air about them, and they're better than everyone else because of their piety. What does the Pharisee and the publican, what does he say? I thank God that I'm not like this man over here, right? Yes. I pay. So he's piety signaling, okay? And these people who are on this crusade, they're piety signalers too. They're just leftist piety signal. You can be a right-wing Pharisee, sure, but these are the opposite type of Pharisee, right?
Yeah, exactly. So if you take a look right now at the top institutions that are funding Skittle stuff in churches, you can go to lgbtfunders.org, and they have a list of the top 10 foundations and NGOs that contribute the most money. Of course, they think this is a good thing. So they're like, look at these wonderful organizations and all that they're doing to infiltrate the church with Skittle stuff. And the number one foundation that contributes to this in the last 10 years is the Arcus Foundation, which is right here next to me. It is like 30 minutes from where I live here in Michigan. And it's a foundation that was funded by John Stryker, who's the heir to the Stryker fortune. If you guys have ever seen hospital equipment that says Stryker, that company makes all of that equipment for like every hospital. Huge company, tons of money. In the last 10 years, this website says $36 million have been awarded to entities that want to connect religious institutions with Skittles communities. So $36 million, that's not nothing, right? At Arcus, they say half of their staff identifies as Skittles. They fight for Skittles rights, social justice, apes, and the environment. So they have this weird overlap where they're like, everyone should be Skittles, and also we're going to preserve great apes for some reason. Very bizarre, but that's their thing, I guess. And in 2017, a really cool reporter found out that 2017 Global Religions Program was this big funding program that received funding from this entity to promote LGBT in Abrahamic religions. So it was specifically a program that got this huge grant to figure out how to insert Skittle stuff into traditional Islam, Roman Catholicism, and any Orthodoxy and Protestantism and Judaism, I believe. So all three major like Abrahamic religions, as they would call them, they were trying to figure out how do we finally basically knock down the last bastions that are trying to resist Skittle stuff in the Abrahamic religions, because they want ecumenism. They want this combination of this like Abrahamic faith center that you guys have seen being built and stuff like that. And they know that a major stumbling block to that is the traditions within all of these churches that still have, resistance to this agenda. So that's a major push for their funding. They gave $120,000 to a news outlet called Religious News Service. I guess that's a pretty influential like media conglomeration in the United States for religious radio programs and media programs. And this was to target traditional Christian churches to accept Skittle stuff. In 2015, Arcus gave an unprecedented $15 million for change your biology programs worldwide in the churches. So that's the next thing, is going to be the transformers being pushed into the church, and $15 million worldwide. And then there were 2 other foundations that added an additional $5 million for a total of $20 million just in 2015 to push this agenda worldwide in all the churches. And then another 200,000 to a Catholic Skittles group, and sent them to like the Catholic Youth Festival in 2015 to like terrorize and counter and like disrupt this more traditional Catholic Youth Festival that was teaching that, you know, LGBT stuff was not to be accepted, but rather was something that you can repent from and things along that line. So they're very serious about this. And this Arcus Foundation is heavily tied to the Obama administration when it was around. The guy who is their director was in the Obama administration. He was a White House staffer. And he was I think he's still the acting executive director, but they got him straight out of the Obama admin, where when he was there, they contributed $1 million to the Obama State Department Global Equality Fund, and his portion of that was to try to get it to churches and stuff. So it's all connected. That's another thing to take away.
Yeah.
The foundations are connected to the governments, that are connected to the corporations, that are connected to the media organizations. And if you look at who's on these boards, it's the same people. You'll have one guy that's on like 12 different boards.
Yeah, and this is something we talked about for many, many years. This is the revolving door. This is how the steering committee style of governance, of shadow governance, actually works, as we covered it today. Yes. Because the same people that are on the Trilateral Commission are part of Bilderberg, and they're also part of the CFR, and they're all moving in those same worlds. And it's very much a small number of people who, as you said, sit on many of these boards and run and promote and control a lot of these things. I was trying to show everybody this quote from St. Paisios but it's not working over here in Streamlabs. So if you go into this actual article where Ortho Christians showed the scandalous mixed media event that they had at Fordham, the Orthodox mixed media event, which had the TRANSVESTITE guy, Nicholas, like the guy thinks he's a vampire or something like that. Vampire Orthodox guy. I'm not joking. Just really weird. And St. Paisios says that if you tolerate and put up with people doing this kind of stuff, and you do it under the cloak of piety, he says you're demonic. And that's the point here, right? No, it's not demonic to be opposing these things. It is right. Demonic to pretend that you're for these things out of piety. That's wickedness. And so the people who oppose us for this kind of stuff are wicked people. And we don't hate those people either. Like, we want these people to, you know, be on the good side, be on the right side of this stuff.
Probably a lot of them have kind of fallen for the propaganda as well. It's probably the people maybe at the tippy top and things like that who kind of know what the real gig is. And probably a lot of their foot soldiers truly believe that they are like creating equality for people within the church, or like giving women opportunities to serve. You know, you hear these cliches. They always have these different tropes and everything to make it sound like really nice, right? Oh, we're not changing church tradition. We just want to create opportunities for women in the church life. We want to create diversity. They have all these catchphrases that make it sound so nice, make it sound so loving. And therefore, if you're against it, well, you must just be really mean. What, do you hate these people? Do you want to just ostracize them? And it's like, no, that's not what anyone is after here. But just to give you like a clue as to what these people are up to, at the Fordham conference, Gail Woloshock, she did a presentation about, she's a scientist, and she did a presentation about LGBT stuff and the fact that she thinks it's a genetic evolutionary paradigm. She's an evolutionary biologist. She believes in evolution. She affirms that it is true. and claims that you can stuff that within orthodoxy and make it work, right? And a quote from her article that she had at this conference was, "We need to consider as a church new questions that were not discussed until recently. In relation to sexuality, this will invite us to ask how far we should go in expecting people to ignore genetic inclinations." So she's inferring that you're born this way. And she said, "Are human beings just about evolution, where reproduction is the only real driver, or are we also about relationships and communion? Have we articulated a theology to deal with same-sex behaviors? As in science, so in theology, there is much work to be done." So, I mean, they tell you what they're doing. It's just, are you going to fall for the flowery language, or are you going to understand what that actually means as far as what they want to do to the church?
Yeah, and 5 years ago when I talked about what was going on in Ancient Faith Radio, the immediate response, which kind of surprised me at the time, was to come after me and to explain why I'm such a bad person, why I need to be excommunicated from as soon as I joined the church. This was a campaign that Father Damick launched against me. Thank God it was unsuccessful, and I almost didn't become Orthodox because of this, and that was done, I think, on purpose to try to get me to not become Orthodox, right? Because the sad part of this is that when you find jurisdictions and churches that are into these kinds of things, you're going to find out pretty quick whether they want you there, and they will make it very clear that you're not welcome there if you are of these persuasions, these normal persuasions. Okay, these are the abnormal people, not us, right? And so these are the people that in the churches commune openly, skittles and changed people. They don't care, and they do it openly and defiantly. Number one, because they're scared, but how are we the bad person for this? Like, I'm not a bad person for talking about the fact that this doesn't make sense in this religion. If you want, I mean, everybody has the freedom. You have the freedom. I'm not saying you should, but you have the freedom to go and live this way, right? But why do you have to try to change? This is the weird part, is that why do you feel the impetus and the drive to change some other institution or some church, right? I mean,
Right.
if I just wanted to, I don't know, let's say let's say I want to be a pimp and I want to have a harem. I want to be a Tate bro. Why would I care? I don't care what these people do. But this is another level beyond that. This is a drive, a power to change the existing institutions as part of some campaign, some warfare that you're engaged in, right?
Yeah.
To promote what is obviously wickedness. And these people have not just stopped at, we just want to be recognized to have our own tastes. No, it's now your kids. And so you are siding with people who now want to go after the kids. You are completely wicked if you do this. Do you understand? What does Jesus say about those that harm kids? You are aligning yourself with these people. All of you wicked people that are aligning yourself to this. Clerics especially.
Yeah, I would argue that this is not loving at all. I mean, I have 5 children, and if I just indulged their wants and their whims and in order to affirm them and not hurt their feelings and make them feel good about themselves all the time, I'd be a terrible mother. There are times where you have to say, I understand that you're struggling with this thing or you want to do this thing, but that's not what's best for you. And so we're not going to do that, right? And the church is supposed to be a hospital for souls. It's not supposed to affirm your current condition and tell you you're wonderful just the way you are, and you don't need to repent, you don't need to struggle, and you don't need to fast and all these things. And that's what these people want to do. So, I mean, just like I was here last time, guys, talking about the women's Bible, the people who rewrote the Bible and made it into the women's Bible, right in the foreword said the purpose of this Bible is because we can't get rid of the institution of Christianity. It's way too influential. It's way too powerful. It's not going to go away. Therefore, we will infiltrate it and change it into something unrecognizable. That's what they put right in the foreword. We have to change Christianity to something that's unrecognizable. And when you think about that, and then you look at this quote from Sarah Riccardi Schwartz, where she said, Within conservative forms of Christianity, such as Eastern Orthodoxy, women's roles have historically been monitored and minimized, with institutional hierarchs silencing the voices of women and members of the Skittles community. What does it mean to be a progressive female activist in a church that historically refuses to acknowledge her equality? How will conservative Christianity be transformed by women who are leading the way to create a new status quo in the Orthodox Church, one that focuses on inclusivity and intersectionality? This project will reveal how Orthodox feminist activists are pushing back against the hegemony of patriarchal Christianity, seeking not to upend tradition, but to transform it even through socio-religious transgression. I mean, that's very aggressive. That's very, like, she's telling you exactly what she's trying to do. And how a priest or a bishop can be like, yeah, that's fine, that's good, and give her money, like give her some money so she can do this. That's like beyond me. I don't understand it at all.
Well, and if anybody wants more information, my publisher puts out the excellent 2-volume series from Whitney Webb on how blackmail actually works to control influential and powerful people. Now, if you think that this only applies to government, you are a naive, childish person. This applies to anyone who has a powerful position in the social sphere. One Nation Under Blackmail by Whitney Webb, excellent 2-volume series. I just got mine the other day. Just started getting into it. Obviously, Rachel's books too. But the reason I point these books out is that, I mean, these are real texts that are blowing open this whole scam and this whole shutdown system. And the people in the church that push this stuff, by the way, they're almost always on the wrong side on everything, right? Like, they're going to be pushing ecumenism. They're going to be pushing evolution. They're going to be pushing destroy Russia, nuke Russia, pro-Ukraine, pro-schismatics, pro-EP, pro-environment. They were the same people that wanted to shut all your churches down, tell you not to venerate the icons throughout all of this last 3 years. You have to get the stabbies. Some of these bishops even saying that you're liable for murder if you're a priest in their jurisdictions and you don't submit to their banning of the chalice, banning of the venerating the icons, threatening to take people to court for murder. Unbelievable. Wild. This is just crazy. So all I'm saying is that those same people, they're almost always going to be aligned on the same stuff. Now, every now and then, some of them will put forward a face of, no, I've signed the declaration of the OCA that I don't believe in, marriage between Skittles. And then they are on the side covertly supporting all this stuff. So don't be naive and think that just because somebody signs a document that, then I guess they believe it. They would never sign a document and subvert the document they signed. And nobody does that. Everybody's honest and totally altruistic, and everybody does what they say. Let's be realistic, man. Okay, the Orthodox Church is not immune to the exact same blackmail, compromise, and corruption as any other institution out there. It's not immune. I think it has the means by which it can survive.
Yeah.
But there are many times in church history when the church is decimated. It is destroyed down to a few bishops left. Multiple times that's happened. And it's entirely possible it can happen in our day. I'm not saying we're necessarily at that point, but I'm trying to warn you guys that it's absolutely the case that can happen. We can have we can have all the patriarchs go bad, go sour, right? That is possible in my understanding, my view, right? I don't think that all the patriarchs are protected.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And again, this can't be a conspiracy when all I have to do is go to their own websites and they tell me exactly what they're trying to do, and they tell me who's giving them the money, and I can trace the funding back. And again, this is like it's like a giant tentacle monster where like this fellow Kevin Jennings, who runs Arcus Foundation, that's giving all the Skittles money to infiltrate specifically traditional churches. He was also the founder of another organization. Like I said, these people are usually have their hands in like multiple cookie jars. They're in multiple different aspects of things. He had one called GLSEN, which stands for Gay, Lesbian, Straight Education Network, which has infiltrated thousands of US secondary schools with Skittle propaganda. So not only is he working on your churches, he's also working on your children's schools at the same time to push this agenda. And again, it's like, if they're so altruistic and they have such good intentions, why are they trying to go around the parents and get the kids? Because if you ask them, they'll tell you, well, we think the parents aren't going to teach them what we want, so we're going to teach them what we want. And that's how this works.
The chat says that you are floating in space because it's like and so you're promoting conspiracy theories from space. How dare you?
Well,
How
we
dare
don't
you?
want to, let's not get into my opinions about space
How
on
dare
YouTube.
you? How dare you? To quote Bill Clinton. Yeah, so it's time to wise up, right? It's time to understand that, you know, and it's not going to go away because, you know, one OCA bishop, you know, is going to pass away who, you know, fosters a lot of this or something like that, right? Well, in 5 years, no, it's not going away because it's more than just this or that bishop. It's also an institutional capture and a bunch of money behind it, right?
Yes.
That is pushing this in multiple areas. And it's not just the OCA that has this issue. There's other jurisdictions that have the exact same, especially the Greeks have this problem big time. And Antiochians do as well. And so I'm only saying this because you have to understand it's not just an ideological battle. There's actually people now coordinating, working together to try to push people like myself, push other people like us out of the church because they want the church to go in a certain direction. And they don't want people that they don't control to be able to speak out, to have a Substack, to have a YouTube channel, to not listen to Ancient Faith Radio or my OCN, right? Which have pushed and posted Skittles stuff for a long time.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at those top 10 foundations I was saying that give the most money to this, it's Arcus is number one, but right after that is Ford Foundation, Open Society, the Bush Foundation. So it's like, these are all huge multi-million-dollar, if not billion-dollar entities. So yeah, thinking that one bishop or a couple guys is the problem, oh no. Because first of all, if they have people that won't go along, it's very easy through the process that we just explained for them to select a person who will be an agent of their agenda and put them where they want them. And they will do anything they need to do to remove someone who's a problem. They can use blackmail, they can create a scandal, they can have false allegations, just like you see in other places, right? So if you see in government, false accusations being thrown at men by women that are 20, 30 years old, they'll do the same thing here. They stick with kind of the same playbook of tactics because it tends to work over and over. Why does it work? Well, because they have people in media, right? They have Operation Mockingbird. They've got a wide network of media institutions that are going to get the memo and repeat whatever the narrative is that they want to create about someone, cause a public outcry, put enough pressure on that person that they either resign or can't afford the court battle, things like that. And then they've got a replacement ready to go, and they can put them in through a grant, through a fellowship, through some kind of endowment or whatever it is to get the person they need in the position of influence. And then that person can influence academia. They can be advisors. When you guys see presidents who have spiritual advisors and things like that, those people generally are placed there and work with academia, media to influence the politician, to get public policy changed and things like that. They do the same thing, it's just in the church. So if you know that this happens in politics, it makes no sense to refuse to believe that it would not happen in churches.
Well, and there's so many mainline intelligence and historical analyses that I've been looking through where we have infiltration and espionage on a large scale. Now, all of these people who know about this, ironically, know about the Cold War. Everybody knows the KGB put in bishops. They had spies. They had their own Russian Orthodox bishops that were secretly KGB. Nobody doubts this. Oh, but wait a minute, that doesn't happen nowadays. The Uncle Sam doesn't put in Skittles bishops, doesn't promote these kinds of people, doesn't buy off the EP, doesn't send money by in the millions to Bartholomew. No, that doesn't happen. That's a conspiracy theory. Oh, that only happened in the Cold War. Oh, we're immune to it now. It doesn't exist anymore. Even though mainline Cold Warriors write about it existing, from left and right perspectives. Oh, well, wait a minute. So is this conspiracy theories or is this just facts? Why would you not go after important clerical offices if you were a geostrategic power like the United States? That's what Rachel and I are talking about, is that these very documents tell you that. That's precisely what the power structure does, is that it goes after these entities to ensure that they will push the agenda.
Yeah, the church has traditionally been a resistance front to these kinds of like globalist and communist and social upheaval things. Like whenever they want to do these big movements, like the Russian Orthodox Church was a big problem for the communists. It was the main problem probably for them. There was other things, but it was a huge thing with getting people on board because they were deferring to their priest and to their bishop and to people who said, no, we're not on board with this and we're not going to be on board with it. And so people would resist, and this was a major problem, but it hasn't changed at all. So here's another really telling and revealing paragraph. This is from the Luce Foundation's paper on their website celebrating its 75 years of influence, where they say, one distinguishing component of the Luce Theology Fellowships is the requirement that fellows make their scholarship accessible to broader audiences. This focus on dissemination has yielded impressive results. Fellows have produced more than 100 books to date, and many have published articles in scholarly journals, church publications, and national magazines. Fellows have also become important voices in the media, writing blogs and giving radio and television interviews that provide a scholarly religious perspective on a range of pressing contemporary issues. So they say the purpose of us having this theology fellowship is so that we can put people in places where they can reach a much broader audience than even just in that church or that jurisdiction. They're going to go out with the megaphone into the media apparatus and spread this message everywhere. And so if they can get enough people, this is exactly how this happened in the 20th century. They get enough people on all the media outlets, in the political, academic, and church institutions, repeating the same kind of messaging. And you can see this like in the last 25, 30 years everywhere, right? Different narratives you can think of from the last few years that they just repeat it and repeat it and repeat it. And what happens is most people, because they want to survive and not be, cast out of society, go, well, everyone's saying this. I'm hearing it everywhere. Everybody can't be wrong. If I'm seeing it on every news station, I'm hearing it on the radio and my friends are talking about it and it's on social media, it's just everywhere. Well, it must be true. They couldn't all be infiltrated. This is what the normal person thinks. They think, well, they can't all be. Think of how many people would have to be in on it. Well, this is how they do that. I'm showing you like in real time how this actually works, how they place people in all these different institutions, and then they connect them all together. So it creates like this spider web where they create their own reality, they create the narrative, and the public has no way of knowing that's what happens. And normal people just listen to the radio or watch TV and they think, well, that must be what it is, right?
Yeah, but remember, Father Damick says that there's no such thing as institutional capture or subversion because there are no think tanks that buy influence or vie for power in Orthodoxy. It doesn't exist. So just doesn't exist. So it's all made up. It's all tinfoil hat, crackpot. So all of those websites that you're talking about that are public, it actually doesn't exist. There are no websites that say these things. So this level of gaslighting, it's like next level, where people, they think that in the age of the internet, that's going to actually work. And that's going to keep people, like under this delusion, when everybody can go read Rachel's article. Everybody can go read these links that talk about the existence of these things, that they're public.
I tell you in the article right where I got all of this, and I go right to them. It's the same thing I did with my book. I don't go to like a secondary source and like create my own opinion and then frame stuff. No, I just literally go to their own website because they love to brag, right? They love to brag and say, look how effective we are. Look,
yeah, if you're in your passions and you're completely subservient to base desires, I mean, you're going to be arrogant, you're going to be impelled by that spirit, which ultimately is your own worst enemy. And I want to show everybody this so that they understand that I showed this on the last stream, but it's really important for tonight's stream because this is the authorized biography of the Rockefellers. I'll show everybody on my document cam there. The Collier and Horowitz book, the classic authorized biography by Collier and Horowitz. This was written from the Rockefeller Archives, Family History and Archives. And I want you to understand the view of religion that they had when they came up with ecumenism. Junior Rockefeller's goal was to create a new world religion that he could run and control. This is page 151, right? And that's through 70 something million dollars put into the ecumenist movement to create the National Council of Churches and the World Council of Churches by the into the 20s and 30s. The Rockefeller family had put, there you have it, $75 million into ecumenism. And they're just nice, happy. They're just nice people. They want everybody to be happy and have a good standard of living. And no, these are radical depopulation advocates.
Yes.
They want to turn the religion to the service of this world religion that they want to create. And I'm trying to find the section where it talks about in the Riverside Cathedral, they erected statues to Buddha, Muhammad, Jesus, Darwin.
Yeah, I have that in my book too.
Hegel, here it is.
Yeah, they had everybody.
Hegel of all
in there.
people? Like Hegel. Like, I get all these other people, but I mean, is Hegel really I mean, I think he's totally, amenable to this ideology. But here you go. In Riverside Cathedral, they created arching main portal that contains figures such as Confucius, Moses, Hegel, Dante, Muhammad, and Darwin. That's the the saints of Junior Rockefeller's New World Religion. And to back up Rachel's point about changing human ethics and human biology, I wanted to show the chapter that we mentioned when Rachel and I were talking about Abby Rockefeller's millions of dollars in support to the feminist movement, particularly third wave feminism, and Cell 16, which she started.
Yeah.
So there's
super radical.
So like terror feminism.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Like here, Abby Rockefeller starts terror feminism. Oh, wait a minute. Zillionaire family starting terror feminism? Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. She was like a radical separatist. She thought that women should just completely have whole separate Amazon jungle communities from men where they just don't even associate with men or talk to them. And it always ties back to the same threads of these really old ideas, right? Of who was the guy who had the in 1930 when he wrote the manifesto about what life was going to be like in 100 years when we were all going to have test tube babies and all that sort of thing. Yes, Lord Birkenhead. She thought, yeah, that's great. We can just be separatists because we're all just going to have test tube babies. We'll have artificial wombs. Technology is going to let us be anything other than human. They always are trying to escape their human condition so that they don't have to submit to God and so that they can be gods and things like that. And it's fun that you mentioned that the Rockefellers dumped $70 million into ecumenism because remember we were talking about the Luce Foundation, guys. And as I said, he was Skull and Bones. He was a member of the Bohemian Club. His partner that he started his magazine with was also. And so he became this media mogul, right? So he's already captured what were the major magazines of the time, the main media influences of the time. And then after that, Henry Luce created the Henry Luce Initiative on Religion and International Affairs. And this was created to influence scholars who advised policymakers, domestic and foreign. They dumped $60 million into this initiative over 16 years to infiltrate academic, public policy, and media organizations. It says this right on his Wikipedia page. It says it right on the Luce Foundation page. They don't hide it. They just reframe it as a good thing. Like, oh, look, we're freeing you from these grumpy old patriarchal institutions that make you be, that have like this strict idea of morality. Why can't everything be moral? Why can't we just do as we will? Why can't we just do what thou wilt, right? That's what it always gets back to, is they want to remove any objective standards of morality or behavior or religion so that they can insert whatever they need to insert for that to work. So yeah, this is huge money. For anyone to say that this doesn't happen, it's like, you know, we're talking $60 million over 16 years back in the 1930s and 40s. That's a lot of money in today's money. And that never stopped. In fact, the Rockefellers and like Luce, they were just the first people to kind of figure out this model. And it's only grown from there. And you have the Tides Foundation. I mean, the list of foundations, Jay will tell you, it's so long, you could never even get through all of them. You could never even get to all the people who are on all the different boards and foundations, and then all the overlap. You would go crazy. Because like if you look at the McCain Foundation, who is on the board of directors, you'll find that 3 or 4 of them are also over here on the Ford Foundation board, and 3 or 4 of those guys are also over here on this board or this new initiative. Or they're in the World Economic Forum, and then they're also in this organization. So it's like a very coordinated effort that influences all the, so institutional capture really is the standard. It's not some weird exception. It's not some weird thing that happens occasionally. It's the way that these entities function.
Yeah, and then I get people asking, "Oh, so you're saying that the Orthodox Church is all captured?" No, I didn't say that. So the Orthodox Church is decentralized, thank God, and it runs on jurisdictions that are not overlapping. Typically, now they might overlap in terms of some territorial disputes, but the idea of autocephalous churches and of limited jurisdictions is a firewall against institutional capture. And when we look at the Roman Catholic Church, we see a great example of institutional capture, not just with Vatican II and John Paul II and all that, but in full fruition with the person of Francis, right? I mean, Francis is now becoming one of the greatest examples of institutional capture, and that's because it's a strict top-down Vatican I model, so that makes it much easier. But the Orthodox model is different, and so it makes it much more difficult to destroy from within. But you do have periods, you do have many instances where you get the state in history infiltrating the church to try to change it. Think about the Arian crisis. The 4th century, only a few bishops were actually Orthodox with St. Athanasius, and they weren't Arian or semi-Arian. Most of the bishops were semi-Arian. They weren't even fully Arian. They were semi-Arian. And then in the iconoclasm crisis, most of the secular bishops were supporting the iconoclast emperor and the heresy of iconoclasm. And you had lay people and monks were the chief driving force against the heresy of ecumenism. In the Council of Florence, the exact same thing, where the majority of the Orthodox world rejected what almost the entirety of the patriarchates had caved on, right? Not all of them, but you had almost a complete capture if it was not for St. Mark of Ephesus and others standing up against the false Union Council of Florence and the worship of papal geopolitical power. We're now at the same juncture, and what's going on isn't really just about changing the Orthodox ethos and morality. That's part of it. But there's a longer game that is being played, which I covered in my last stream, which is to move these churches not just in the direction of new morality, but back into the sphere of Rome. And the reason they want to move the churches, especially Orthodoxy, back to the sphere of Rome, which Bartholomew openly talks about, it's not a conspiracy theory, he openly talks about it all the time, is because the papacy is that captured institution par excellence. And if you can get the Orthodox Church back under the captured institution of the papacy, it's all the more easy to then turn all of this into the new world religion, which we are seeing emerge right now with the Abu Dhabi Faith Center of the Muslims, the Jews, and the Christians all worshiping together. Francis's Fratelli Tutti included prayers for Unitarians. A papal encyclical now including prayers for evangelicals and Unitarians and non-Trinitarians in his encyclical. So it's not hard to figure out if you have discernment, but so many people have lost discernment. They have no discernment at all in the Orthodox world too.
Yeah, and just to show some continuity between what Jay's talking about now and in his last stream and what we're talking about with Fordham and the Luce Foundation, remember that Henry Luce was best pals with John Foster Dulles, and that the Luce Foundation has an 80-year track record of cooperating with the CIA and helping them with all of their stuff. And the foundation was really created kind of as a philanthropic guise under which to do that, right? So these foundations are often, if not always, tied in with intelligence as well, just like the Vatican and just like John Courtney Murray, the book that you're always talking about. It's very continuous. It's like really, really easy to, once you see the pattern, it's like, oh, this is all everywhere. But yeah, there will be people who resist. They'll never get every single person everywhere, but all they have to do is get enough at the top of each institution to have the majority of the influence and control over what they do. So
yeah, and I mean just the straight up hardcore facts demonstrate all this. So
yeah,
we are not talking about theory. We are talking about actual white papers and actual funding that are public on all of these journalists and activists and academics' websites. Okay, so there's no conspiracy theorizing here. It's all straight from their own writings and their own documents.
Yes.
And ultimately, it's a. I mean, the motivation is satanic, but there's also a longer geopolitical plan that we have to keep in mind, which I did cover in the last stream. But I want to remind everybody that you can read about that here, because Bartholomew has talked about this openly for many, many years. His ultimate goal, he says, when the time is right, is to go back to Francis, his buddy Francis. And if you can't see that erecting a common Abu Dhabi faith center together with anti-Trinitarians, that's a problem, then you have lost discernment. You don't have the faith. That's a problem with you guys. It's not a problem with me. It's not a problem with our side, right? Anyway, I'm getting way off in terms of the theology, but I mean, it's also connected to your book. I mean, people don't understand that, like, part of what you're talking about ties into the feminist stuff, because that's part of the attack on the priesthood, the attack on God the Father, the attack on patriarchy is part of why you've got to have women priests.
Yes. There was a lady preacher person on Twitter having an absolute panic attack yesterday because I guess the Baptist convention said again this year they're not going to do female clergy, and she was having an epic meltdown, and she quoted Matthew 28, the Great Commission, and was like, I guess they just left out the whole Great Commission part where it says we're supposed to baptize the nations. I'm like, lady, the whole context of that was Christ sending out to his apostles and the 70, right? And saying, I am making you priests. I'm giving you the power to remit and retain sins. You are to go and baptize it. It was not a thing to tell women that they should become priests whatsoever, but they will take this stuff and just random, like, meme generator, pick a verse and make it sound feminist or whatever, and use it to try to push this nonsense that it's unfair, that it's not fair. We have to have equality. And it's like, if nobody's going to push back on that, think about what that would really look like. Think about what it would really look like if we just had widespread lady priests and there was no more patriarchy, there was no more patriarchate. There was just, it's like the foundational blocks of what we believe in, and people think you can just toss that out. It's the same thing as going, well, we can say prayers for the Unitarians and Pachamama and all these other things, where you're essentially saying nothing anymore. Like if Christianity is just, it can be Unitarian, it can be pagan, then it means nothing. And that's what they want, because it takes away any power that it has, and it makes
if the salt loses its flavor, then it's worthless. It's only to be thrown out, right? So if you lose your saltiness, it's you're worthless, right? It doesn't do anything. That's what Jesus says in the Sermon on the Mount. So and by the way, what are the warnings? What does Jesus say about harming little ones? So again, I have to stress that the people that are aligning themselves with these people are people who are open about, now, we want the kids. It's not just about Skittles' marriage. Now it's about,
Yeah,
we want
and
your kids.
how do you get to the kids, right? How do you get to the kids? You remove the dads and then you get to the moms. And now you've got the kids.
Exactly.
So this is the reason why, if you look at like 1960, when only like 6% of kids were born to out of wedlock parents versus I think the most recent stat I have is like 2014, that now 58% of children are born to out of wedlock parents. Most biological kids, or most kids now have not both biological parents in the home with them growing up. And if you look at the rates of abuse, of what happens to children when there's some other adult who's not the biological parent. And I'm not saying step parents are bad. There's plenty of great step parents. I'm just saying statistically, removing the father from the family makes the mother very vulnerable. It makes the children extra vulnerable. And it's a great situation for people who are predators. And so it's the same kind of idea. If you want to get to the children, you get the men out of the way, and the women are very easily influenced, and they will go along with something if it sounds like, we just want to be nice. We just want to be nice. Don't you want to be nice? And women are like, well, yeah, we want to be nice. And don't you want your kids to be nice? Well, yeah, I want my kids to be nice. Well, then you have to be equal, and you have to let these people in, and you have to let this ideology in, because otherwise you're being exclusive. And like I said, women are much more susceptible to this kind of shaming, whereas the dads will stand in the way and kind of be like, what? No, absolutely not. And women have a lot of influence over public schools. They go to the conferences, they go to, this was traditionally like the women's sphere is to take care of the children and the community and the schools and the churches. So yes, they want you to be feminist, and they want you to think you don't need a man, and that anyone can be a priest, and anyone can be a dad, and anyone can be a mom, and you can have surrogates and all this stuff that you're seeing now. It's just a very easy way to get to the kids.
It's the curse of sterility and barrenness. And in scripture, those are actual curses. Now, I'm not saying that if you're a woman, an individual, and you can't have kids, that you're necessarily cursed.
No.
We see many saints in scripture, many women in scripture who can't have kids, and they're lauded and praised, and it's not their fault. So that's not my point. But my point is that when there should be fruitfulness, when there should be these kinds of things, the barrenness is a curse in scripture. And so to adopt these things, as many, for example, Protestant denominations that adopted the Skittles stuff, those are dying denominations. Mm-hmm. Do you understand that? And this is like factually Pew Research information.
Yeah, that's at the beginning of my article. I have a bunch of stats about the decline of Protestant Christianity. Let's see here.
Notice, guys, the Protestants that accepted all of this stuff 190, 80 years ago, foisted upon them by the foundations that we're talking about, those are now dying. In other words, there will not be, for example, Cumberland Presbyterians in 20 or 30 years. There will not be mainline PCUSA Presbyterians in 50 years. There will not be mainline Lutherans in 30 or 40 years. Their own studies show this because they've adopted the curse of sterility in these liberal ideologies to their own self-destruction. And the OCA, people that are doing this and going in this direction, you will also go under that same curse of barrenness, and you will kill your own jurisdictions and churches and denominations.
Yeah, I mean, isn't it ironic that these Skittles outreach groups, the way they sell it, so what they approach a church with a bunch of money, and this is Protestant churches because they tend to be much more, they have the opposite problem of the Catholics, where they don't have any centrality, usually very, very little. It's very autocephalous to the point that there's like hardly ever a governing body at all. So they just approach them with a bunch of money and they go, look, your membership numbers are dwindling, right? And the church says, yeah. And they go, well, look, if you open it up, it's kind of the same thing they tell Republicans. You just need to have a big tent and let everyone in, and then you'll be popular, and then you'll win and have all this influence. Well, no, it just means that you don't mean anything. You don't stand for anything. So this was a Gallup poll from 2020 that found that only 47% of Americans said they belonged to a church, down from 70% in 1999. And when Gallup started keeping track in 1937, it was at about 73% church membership. So from 1937 to 1999, that number stayed pretty steady at 70% of Americans having membership in a church, and now it's less than half. It's 47%. And there's just, the decline gets worse every year. When you look at people that even go to church more than once or twice a year, that number is super low.
Yeah, and some people are saying, "How do I know? How do I know?" I mean, if your bishops are openly aligned with the Democratic Party, maybe that's a good sign. Okay, so it's not that hard to figure it out, guys. If you're if you're in some of these jurisdictions, you can go on their websites, you can go figure out what their positions are, where they stand, and don't give money to bishops that are openly supporting Joe Biden, that are openly supporting all of this Skittles. Why would you give those people your money? I'm not asking for that money. Go find a good church that doesn't do that and give them your money. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, I would agree. And like Jay said, it's not super hard to find out. I mean, if you're going to the church, you should kind of know what they're pushing and what they're telling people. And if they're, saying that Skittles stuff is just something you're born with that you can't help, and God loves that, and he thinks it's exactly the same as husband and wife, marriage. If they're saying it's exactly the same, no, that's not what the position of the church has been for 2,000 years. Why would it suddenly be the position now? I mean, it seems very easy to understand to me, but I know some churches, like my church, made a little bit of a concession with the coof stuff, where our priest kind of said, look, I do not believe that venerating icons or taking the Eucharist is going to make you sick. We don't believe that. But if you absolutely are scared, I understand some people are scared, we have a little section over here where you can go. If you want to go over here and isolate and wear a mask and those sort of things, you can do that over here, but I'm not going to make the whole church change the Eucharist or change how we venerate or change how we worship or anything like that. So like that would be something reasonable where the person is really actually trying to deal with a scared population. But if you had somebody who was telling you like, no, we're shutting it down and we're not doing communion and we're not venerating icons, or you have to change all those things, I think that's a big red flag.
Absolutely. Let's get to the super chats. We've got some good ones here. Let's see. We have Rabbi Lampshade $3. Jay, I've been learning a lot from your videos. What are your thoughts about national divorce? I don't know what you mean. I guess you mean replacement theology, or the idea that the church is Israel. I mean, that's what Paul says. Cooter Brown, $10. You guys are crushing it. This is an important stream. Also, will you do a cocaine bear analysis? It looks like a funny movie, so probably. J Mel, $50. I live in Seattle. I'm surrounded by Skittles. Father Hopko's book, Same-Sex Attraction, helped me reconcile with what's around me. This is a fantastic stream. Thanks for Rachel. Thank you to Rachel. Thank you, J Mel. I've not read that book, but it sounds like it helped you out. That's good. Let's see. Joseph Siambra, $5. God bless you, Jay, for being brave. One of the reasons that I went to Rocor Church was over Skittles and Catholicism. I hope that I think they will never go full Fruit Loop. I might be wrong, but I won't see it in my lifetime. Right. So, there's not like a perfect jurisdiction. People misunderstand that. It's just that the organized opposition to what I'm doing mainly is coming from the OCA, and then obviously elements of the Antiochians as well, obviously with Father Damick and Ben Cabe. So, I mean, that's not hard to figure out. I'm not going to name a bunch of names in terms of all the other clerics and who it is. But again, I mean, if you're in those jurisdictions and these people are openly supporting Biden, openly supporting communing people that, and it's like they'll commune Skittles openly and then try to excommunicate people that talk about Skittles. Right. That's what's going on. That's the absurd hypocrisy that's going on here. So DM $5. Jay, thank you for your content. What are your thoughts on old calendarist churches? I mean, as long as they're not schismatic, if they've been reconciled to the church, it's fine with me. I mean, I go to Rocor Church, does the old calendar. James Cotardis, $5. Jay, G.K. Chesterton was a bulwark against Fabian socialists. That's correct. He did write against the Fabian socialists, and he wrote against the eugenics. Sure. He wrote a defense, quote, orthodoxy. Yeah, I'm aware of his book, Orthodoxy and Heterodoxy. Traditional Catholic. Are you familiar with Chesterton? Yes, I've been familiar with Chesterton for 20 years. I'm not a huge fan of the style of writing of Chesterton, so I've never really gotten into it, but I do appreciate his stance against the eugenicists, the Fabians, the technocrats in England. Bayes Pay Piggy, $25. Thank you for explaining the nuances here. God bless Jay, Jamie, and Rachel and Andrew. Thank you, Bayes Pay Piggy. Much appreciated.
Thank you.
Palantir, $1. It's crazy when you understand satanic ideas of subversion, and then you look at the symbol of the rainbow, which is God's covenant with Noah. Thank you for the stream. Yeah, that's an inversion of the covenant with nature, and this is something unnatural.
Yeah.
So that's exactly why. Petty, $20. God bless you guys. God bless you, Petty. Much appreciated. Guys, remember to subscribe to Rachel's channel. Here is Rachel's article that gets into the details of this on her Substack. Anything you want to leave us with before we go? I've told everybody, everybody should get your book, Occult Feminism, The Secret History of Women's Liberation. But any other messages or things or thoughts you want to leave us with?
Well, the reason I started a YouTube channel is because I seem to be like this tiny minority as a woman online talking about this. And I can't help that I was born in the time and place that I am, but that's God's providence. And somebody has to push back on this over feminization of society, this demonization of men and patriarchy and fatherhood and the priesthood. Like, these are essential things that I care about a lot. So I'm really trying to help people understand the level of brainwashing of why feminism is just like everyone's default worldview now, why the family has been pretty much destroyed, why the birth rates are like at a catastrophic low that could be like a society ending thing if it continues on this trajectory. Like, these are really heavy, big, serious topics, but I'm hoping to make it kind of fun and informative and help people just understand this kind of stuff and how to combat it in their own life, because it can be really hard. You feel like you're swimming upstream against the entire current of society by just trying to have what would have been considered a normal life in my grandma's time, right? So
Yes.
actually going to be interviewing my 96-year-old grandma for the channel and asking her what the last 100 years living through it and seeing all the changes has been like. So that should be fun. And I've done a series that I started with Patrick about the patriarchy, what the patriarchy is and what it's not, because it's been very unfairly demonized. People hear that word and they think abuse of women, right? It's not the case. So I'm just trying to kind of turn the tide. And I think especially with women, if you just give them permission to be women, that's what they want to do. So I'm just trying to make that cool and permissible again and make those women feel not so alone. And, you know, hopefully help some families in the future. Somebody's got to talk to the women about this. Jay can't do it. The men in our sphere can't do it because it's just instantly seen as misogynist. So that's what I'm trying to do. If you guys would like to support me, go sub to my channel, sub to my Substack, buy my book, any of that kind of stuff. And I'm just going to keep going.
Awesome. And I want to remind everybody too that we have a show sponsor, our favorite, the best, the most awesome of all supplements in the supplement universe. That is chalk.com, CHOQ.com. Head on over to chalk.com. Use the promo code J50 to get 50% off any of the products in that store. They got everything you could imagine. Tonkat Ali, that's great for boosting testosterone. They have the studies, peer-reviewed studies showing that it actually does boost testosterone. We want to up our toxic masculinity. We want to be toxically masculine. We celebrate that here. And be sure and go watch Rachel's series that she's doing with David Patrick Carey over at Church of Eternal Logos. Go and get you some Iris Moss if you're one of the ladies that has hormone imbalances. Well, guess what? Iris Moss is great for that. Guess what else they've got? Action 2.0 to boost those energy levels when you're running low, but you want to get in the gym every day. You want to be in the habit of doing that. She Legit, mental focus and clarity. Jamie has been burning through the books once again because she's back on the She Legit. So if you want that mental focus and clarity that only comes with She Legit, which is kind of becoming the rage with carnivore keto people now. They're loving to take She Legit. Mm-hmm. It's a great product. I highly recommend it. Use the promo code J50 to get 50% off. And I want to say too that if you don't want to keep putting that stupid code in and you just want that recurring subscription, use the promo code J60Life, J60LIFE. That'll get you 60% off all recurring subscriptions over here on Bigot Central. This is Bigot Central. We're here crafting together like alchemists in our dark alchemy lab, new sources of toxic masculinity, new sources. Putin and Dugin are on the phone right now telling me through their sorcery lines, through the ether how to make potions and concoctions to turn the men into bigots.
Jay's turning the men into bigots, and I'm trying to force all the women back into the kitchen.
There we go.
Yeah, that's what we're about, I guess.
That's what we're about. So you get Rachel's book. Also, guys, remember you can get over to our other sponsor, which is Richard Grove over at tragicandhope.com, the best geopolitical podcast out there besides my own when we cover that topic, which we did today for Lord Voldemort. Go check that out over on my Rockfin. I'll have the Lord Voldemort show that we did today on my Rockfin here in a little bit. And note, guys, that the new season of the philosophy course will be out. Will be starting March 9th. That means that if you sign up for the tutor option, I will be there March 9th and every successive Thursday giving you one-on-one tutoring for that History of Western Philosophy class for 12 weeks, 30-ish, 35 hours of lectures, and then you get me for tutoring. You don't have to get the tutoring option. You can get the single option of the do-it-yourself, just the course. Both of those payment options are there, as well as installments. Richard put installments in there. So again, follow Richard over at Rockfin on Tragedy and Hope on Grand Theft World, and look for the summit we're having this weekend. Richard's got a bunch of liberty-minded individuals who are into homesteading, self-sufficiency, starting a farm, starting a garden, starting your own business. All of that Richard is putting together for this weekend at the there's so many things going on, I can't even keep up there. He called it the Autonomy Summit, I think is what he called it. But that is over. If you go to Richard's Twitter, scroll down. I'm going to reshare that right now because I think I forgot. I was going to reshare that earlier.
One more thing I should mention too.
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
If you guys are interested in that kind of thing, the self-sufficiency, homesteading, homeschooling, I have a homeschooling series on my channel also, and I'm going to have Professor John Kleisek on next week with me, talking about his book, School World Order, and he's going to give us all the details on the education system in America and what you might want to know about that, and then lots of homeschooling tips and advice too. So.
Yeah, he's a cool guy. I interviewed him a couple of years ago. We had a good conversation, and yeah, his book is also from my publisher, as is Whitney Webb's book too. Where's the summit? Here we go. So the summit is this. I'm going to share it again for you guys. March 5th. So maybe that's next weekend. Excuse me. Whenever the 5th is. It will be myself, James Corbett, Last American Vagabond, Benny Wills, our buddy, Charlie Robinson over at Microaggression, Richard Grove, and others. So here is that. Go and sign up for that if you want. At the University of Reason, I just shared it to the top of my Twitter. So that'll be March 5th. And I think that's it. So thank you so much, Rachel. And be sure and subscribe to Rachel's channel, guys. It's linked in the show description. And also get her book. Thank you so much, Rachel.
Thank you, Jay. Thanks for having me on again.
Absolutely. Great conversation. And really always impressed at your research and how much, connections, how much digging and the fact. All the facts that you put together, like you're just a fact machine. You just like
that's me. I'm a
fact generator.
Machine.
Not a fax machine, a fact machine.
There's nothing I love more than diving into a deep research rabbit hole.
Me too.
Yeah, love that stuff.
All right, awesome. Thank you so much, and have a good night.